Welcome to the latest episode of The Independent. I'm Pete Sampson atop Stanford Stadium in the Notre Dame administration box, following Notre Dame's 56-23 win over Stanford, which was all sorts of weird. Audric Estimé finish is with 25 carries, 238 yards, 4 touchdowns, all career highs, sets a single season touchdown record for running backs at 18, could have set the single game rushing record, but essentially asked not to go back in the game, or did not ask to go back into the game. He knew how close he was. Dylan McCullough knew how close he was. Marcus Freeman did not. But overall, Notre Dame finishes 9-3 in the regular season, which feels, I think, it was Matt, you're in Ann Arbor, or were in Ann Arbor today. Ohio State came up a couple times in the post-game press conference, one for Javonte Jean-Baptiste asking if he watched it, since he's an Ohio State grad transfer. Marcus Freeman wasn't asked about it, even though he played there. And then Audric Estimé was asked about it in terms of, do you look back at the Ohio State game and think, man, this season there was more out there for you? Because I felt like tonight for Notre Dame was kind of a reminder of, there was more out for this team, but also maybe a reminder of like why it didn't click any more than it did.
Yeah, that would be my takeaway, right? Like, maybe if Ohio State won, you're like, oh, shoot, we could have beat a team that might win the national championship this year if they beat Michigan today. Like, I don't look at what happened at noon in Ann Arbor with any influence or impact on how I view what happened in Palo Alto tonight. I thought the way you just summed it up was appropriate. Like, yeah, there were certainly points of this season that made you think this team had a lot of good things in front of it. And then the first half tonight reminding you of all the reasons they don't. Like, it was just it was a little bit like that 19 game where, they kind of messed around for a half and you're like, something not right here. Sam Hartman throws a really bad pick. There's a little sideline thing that I didn't think was much, but, it was caught on camera, the 12 people who watch on the Pac-12 network. And they,
which Freeman did explain afterwards, and Estimé did too, where he essentially was Freeman holding Estimé accountable for Jermon Payne's fumble that wasn't a fumble, because he's the star running back and like, hey, get your room in order, which Estimé said he appreciated. But yeah, It was...
Did Hartman get reamed out for Angeli's pick? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know how it works both ways. I mean, I think Hartman had stuff
for anything.
Hartman had stuff to get reamed out himself. That the kind of just weak fumble on the first drive when you've spent all week talking about starting fast, and then the weak pick as well was just like it. It was just like it was a very weird 56-point game. Where Notre Dame put up 521 yards of offense, 381 on the ground. Didn't really need the quarterback to do much. He had a couple play action touchdown passes, but I think overall it was kind of like some of the best of Notre Dame, and some of the reason why there wasn't like that next level beyond what we saw tonight, or what we saw for the last 3 months. That they just needed to be a little bit better than they were. I still feel like this team had it in their locker to do it, but it was a great defense with a star running back, and then a passing game that just wasn't really there. Hartman finishes 8 of 14 for 142 touchdowns in that pick. The leading receiver is a former walk-on lacrosse player, Jordan Faison, three catches, 66 yards, and a 45-yard touchdown.
Right, and Jaden Greathouse and Tobias Merriweather each had a catch, remind you of what could have been. And for each of them, that was their sole catch of the night, which, again, is kind of emblematic for this receiver group over the course of the season. And Audric Estimé, I don't know if this was spoken. You were there. It felt like almost an unspoken, like, stiff arm FU to the Doak Walker committee of like, so you're going to tell us he's not one of the 10 best. And look, I think there are a lot of things to like, a lot of things that a lot of teams, a lot of players, a lot of coaches like to play the disrespect card for. And a lot of times I think it's just whatever. I mean, Auric Estimé is one of the 10 best running backs in the country, regardless of his usage this year. I think most people, he was a betting favorite. We said this on this podcast about a month ago, which I don't know if I'd say is a favorite, but he's one of the 10 best running backs in the country. If you're trying to prove that, I think you had 11 games before that where you probably could have and should have used him more, and me and you have banged that drum probably on every post game show so far this season. So, look, I get why you want that pass game to work and why you don't like quit on the pass game, because that's not realistic, especially with a six-year quarterback. But I said it at the Ohio State game, and whatever that was, the 5th game of the year, 4th week of the year. And only tonight do I come away with, watching a Notre Dame football game and feeling like, all right, you rode your running back the way he's supposed to be ridden. Like I felt, and look, it's easy for me to say, I know the guy's superhuman freak physically. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, and it doesn't mean it could be irresponsible to run him into the ground every single game. That being said, like, they're called workhorse backs for a reason. The guy's a bruiser. I thought when he was on the field and given the ball, we got to see the best of what he was about. I just don't think we saw enough of that until it was too late. This late in the year. Also, did you see that? I think their Instagram posted a highlight reel of him midweek when he got left off. And did you see what the caption was?
No, what was it?
Bet.
Yeah, that he was asked about that too.
Which they're selling the shirts right here in Ann Arbor if someone wants one in South Bend.
But the person didn't understand the slang of it. They actually thought it was betting opposed to finito, done.
No.
So
maybe
it was.
I don't know.
Yeah, it was like you got Audric Estimé. This may have been the last game of his college career. So use him or lose him, and they used him. It was fun to watch. He was the star of this offense, as much as Hartman was sort of cast as the star of the offense early on. In the end, it was the Estimé show, and it was fun to watch. I mean, it was funny being in the post-game press conference here and thinking back 2 years ago when it was Michael Mayer in there after I think he had 8 catches for 104 yards and had been left off the Mackey semifinalist or finalist list.
Even that's 3 versus 10, which is
again,
and we should have been on it, but like
we were all like, do they even know they even know who Michael Mayer is? This is just all very confusing. That storyline lasted 48 hours before the world imploded. So hopefully,
that's right. That's why I forgot about
it. Knock on press row. I would love to still be talking about Audric Estimé being a Doak Walker snubbed running back 72 hours from now. But it's just like I said this during the week. Like, there was the golden DC Broyles list snub air quotes and the Estimé snub, and I felt like I looked at the Broyles list and thought, like, yeah, I guess I could see El Golden maybe not making it, even though I think he's had a great year. When I looked at the Doak Walker award list, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense at all. In part because, like, Notre Dame's offense, there was no pass game for 75% of the year. I mean, they had one last week. They had one when Mitchell Evans is healthy. That's sort of been about it. Right. So if you wanted to force Notre Dame to run the ball, you could. And sometimes they couldn't do it. I mean, they're also doing it with 2 backup offensive linemen. So, yeah, I thought Estimé deserved a little bit more notice, and I enjoyed the fact that he was authentic in one saying, you know what, I didn't want to go back in the game. I don't need the record, but also authentic in the fact that he was like, when I got left off the list, he was like, yeah, that hurt. Like, that kind of pissed me off. Because I think a lot of guys pretend like it's just not that big of a deal. And for Estimé, he said, like, hey, that was one of my goals this year, is to win the Doak Walker Award. Fell short of the final hurdle there, which neither of us quite can grasp, but he's just, I think, very straightforward and straight up about, like, yeah, that sucked. I felt like I should have been on there, and I hope that I showed some people that I should have been on there tonight, because he certainly did.
Yeah, it's funny saying this in like suburban Detroit right now. I watched the Amazon Prime documentary on Barry Sanders earlier this week, and I remember watching him as a player. I don't remember all like the stories the way I would now as a reporter. And it was, whether it was high school, college, or NFL level, part of the appeal of Barry Sanders was he had a chance to break all these records and do all these things. He won the Heisman, was almost annoyed he had to wake up and do the ceremony. I got like those flashbacks of like, yeah, why isn't he going in? He could break the record, or he could do this, or he could do that. But yeah, look, the guy's really, really good. Audric Estimé. Bowl game will be interesting, I think, for several players as far as who's going to play, who's not going to play. I mean, it was interesting. I was at Michigan, Ohio State today. I was at Penn State, Michigan State last night because it was in Detroit and I was here. And Penn State last night and then Ohio State today, neither of whom are going to be playing in the playoff. Multiple play, like it didn't even cross my mind. Like post game, all the questions for a lot of the players be like, "So is this your last game in a so and so uniform?" Because it's almost like, why would you play in a bowl game? And I don't think it should be taken to that extreme, but that's kind of like Marvin Harrison Jr., who's probably the best player in the country, is assured of being a top 10 pick, might not play, even if it's in it will be in a New Year's Six game, but won't be in a playoff game, which I can understand. Audric Estimé, like we still don't know if he's going to go pro yet or not. Now, again, running backs are different because you've only got so many good years and miles in you, so to speak, and the way the position is just completely devalued by the NFL right now. I'm personally, I'd say that makes you more inclined to go get yours, or at least that's what I would say.
Freeman referenced it post game. He's like, he's got a decision to make. Like, and it wasn't even like, I hope he really comes back. It was,
Blake Corum came back to Michigan with a sweet NIL deal. Yeah, that wasn't all of it. And his role's completely changed, and he hasn't been as good this year as last year because he tore up his leg last year, at the end of last year, and still recovering from injury. But he also came back to win a national championship, which they might do. What's the – I don't want to say what's the appeal because there's a lot of good things happening in college football at Notre Dame, et cetera. But, when you're making that pros versus cons list, what's going to – tilt in Notre Dame's favor, so to speak.
It's
how far is he away from getting his degree? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would almost have to be like Michigan this year, where everybody comes back. Like, and I'm not like including Joe Alt in there, but Blake Fisher comes back, and Riley Mills and Howard Cross and Jack Kaiser and Xavier Watts. If they all come back, then you'd be like, ooh, okay, Notre Dame's maybe got something to work with here. But it makes much more sense that for Alt and Estimé, this may have been it tonight. We haven't seen an offensive lineman at Notre Dame opt out of a bowl game yet. But, we have seen captains do it, which is totally fine. I mean, there's no judgment in it. Isaiah Foskey and Mayer last year. And
if any of them saw Zach Sinter's injury today, like, go. Like, that was terrible. And he's, one of their best players. Like, it was nasty. The way he got carted off, and it just, you don't think about those with offensive linemen. But again, I don't mean to get dark here, but I just go get yours. Like I don't even, not to take the conversation further, but like, Dave Clawson makes his comments this week, which he obviously shouldn't have done, about Sam Hartman. And it's still like I felt like some of the offense that Notre Dame folks took to it was like, about the money, and it's like, why are we still having this like morality play here throughout college? Like, I guarantee you, on signing day in 3 weeks, I guarantee you at least half the coaches in the country will get up there and get asked about a prospect who signed, and they'll say he didn't even ask about NIL during his recruitment. That's how serious he is about being here. Okay, well, he should, because he's worth a lot of money. Like, I'm so over the like, it's legal. Like what are we? Yeah. Go to the highest bidder, or don't. I think just get money.
And for Notre Dame's point of view, it's we talk about Sam Hartman as a grad transfer and the NIL impact there. Like Javonte Jean-Baptiste certainly was worth a NIL deal if he got one outside of just the basics. But also, he was asked about this post game. It was like he increased his value by coming to Notre Dame. I don't know how many reps he gets at Ohio State this year if he stays. Heck of a lot less than he got at Notre Dame, where he was at times Notre Dame's best defensive player in flashes. And I mean, I was down on the field before the game. There's a scout for the San Francisco 49ers actually walks into Notre Dame's warmups to shake hands with him, just to be like, hey, I've been watching you. You've had a hell of a season, and he has. So it's like if you're Notre Dame, moving forward with NIL type stuff, it's not just finding Javonte Jean-Baptiste again in the transfer portal, which I believe that they 100% will try to do, but it's also, Cross, Mills, Kaiser, Estimé if he's entertaining this, Watts. You got to take
They
care
are
of your
loaded
roster.
at running back. I don't, not to
Yeah.
downplay how good Audric
Yeah.
Estimé is, but as far as
Yeah.
needs, no,
Yeah,
I mean,
there's no question. It's just like you look at, especially defensively, and the way they played tonight against Stanford. Stanford had some incredibly funky stuff where I don't think I've ever seen a running back or a slot receiver line up between a tackle and a guard in an offensive formation. They scored on a fake reverse that looked like it was from the Tim O'Malley flag football playbook in the first half, but after that, they couldn't really do anything until the very end when the backups were in. But it's just like you look at the spine of this defense and what could come back next year. Jack Kaiser has a pick that almost went for 6. Cross and Mills, Watts. That the defense could, with some portal infusions, kind of pick up where they left off. Offense will look a hell of a lot different without Hartman and Estimé if that's how it works out. But it's just, overall tonight it was, we talked about offensively how this was kind of a reminder of like what they could have been, but also maybe why they weren't. Defensively, this was kind of an off-brand performance for Notre Dame. They gave up because they gave, if you take out the 53-yard pass to EJ Smith and the 49-yard run by their backup quarterback, Stanford averaged 3.59 yards per play. Like, that's nothing. But Notre Dame doesn't give up those 2 chunk plays really ever. And so that was a little bit off. The run was just, I think some defenders kind of got caught in their own wash. The pass looked like Botello just sort of got lost in space a little bit. But Stanford, but when the game was being put away in the third quarter, I think they were 2 of 12 on third down. They had done absolutely nothing to push the ball. Notre Dame not only had the pick with Kaiser, but had back-to-back 4th down stops, which essentially on turnovers on downs. They should count as turnovers, even though they are not in the scorebook. Because I think Notre Dame, they were at one point they were -3 in turnover margin, but winning the game, which is really hard to do. Because I think earlier in the year I looked at Power 5 versus Power 5 games, and like teams that were -3 won 10.9% of the time. I think they were like 33 and 300 or something. It was a ridiculous figure. But that's a comment on who Notre Dame is, and it's also a comment on who Stanford is. At post game, Freeman was talking about the rivalry, and I guess it's a game that is. It's the best kind of rivalry, right? If you're Notre Dame, you can say it's a rivalry, but really we're getting back to the Walt Harris days of Stanford, where Notre Dame should just roll in here.
You know what? Marcus Freeman is 1-1 against these guys. He's got to play it up until he gets above 500.
I'm
still like, I'll go to my grave. I know like no one will embrace it, and understandably so, the way they will USC or Michigan or even Navy. But it's a great freaking rivalry for a while there.
It was incredible.
As far as, like,
10 years ago,
the intellectual brutality era of Harbaugh Shaw. It was a smash mouth rivalry. We would hear the stories back then in like the 12, 13-ish years. These guys really don't like each other. USC is the rival, but like the players, like familiarity breeds contempt. Like, these are a lot of guys whose biggest offers or their finalists were Notre Dame and Stanford. There was some coaching back and forth, right? Brian Polian, Mike Stanford, not like guys who worked at both places.
Yeah.
They're like, it was like a game I looked forward to most from a football standpoint for about a 3 or 4 year stretch there. And it's nowhere near that right now. I think Troy Taylor's a very good coach, and I think he'll get them as good as they can possibly get in this era, especially when they're playing in the ACC, which is going to be a challenge. But Yeah,
Maybe this game will be on the ACC network next year. No, it's
Well, get it now.
Notre Dame home game. Yeah, but next time Notre Dame is out here at least. But
One of the best parts of starting the independent podcast was the chance to pick the brands we wanted to work with, and Rowback was at the top of our list. As someone who wears their quarter zips, polos, hoodies, and more, I can tell you the quality, fit, and feel is unmatched. You've seen Rowback on Audric Estimé, Michael Mayer, and Kyle Hamilton. You've seen it on fans at Irish tailgates all season long, too. While the gear hasn't turned me into an All-American player or grill master, Rowback is still my go-to when going for a run, taking my kids to the park, or just lounging around the house on the weekends watching football. So make sure you're comfortable throughout the season with Rowback. Go to rowback.com/Irish for 20% off your purchase. That's 20% off for all customers at rowback.com/Irish.
Matt, what have you always said is my biggest weakness on fall Saturdays?
Well, Pete, I'd say your hair, but who am I to talk? Let's go with your wardrobe.
Harsh but fair.
ESQ outfits over 400 professional athletes, celebrities, and Irish players on game day with bespoke clothing that elevates their game off the field. ESQ sculpts every garment with precision, helping you look your best for work, weddings, celebrations, or in your case, Pete, the press box.
Listeners of The Independent can get 15% off their first online order by using the code IND15 at checkout. That's IND15, or visit them at their Chicago showroom for a full custom look. Head to esqclothing.com to create your perfect fit. Stanford is, I just don't understand the road back for them to getting even close to where they were with Shaw or Harbaugh. Like I just don't see it. Aside, even if the Pac-12 was going to exist after tonight, I don't.
Pac-12 is awesome this year.
Yeah,
So
but it's just
challenge,
like there's no what's the identity of this place now? It's a West Coast school who plays on the East Coast and has a Midwest rival that is just going to start whipping you again. I just don't get it. So it's tough to. I feel bad for Stanford in the sense of like I liked their style of football when Harbaugh and Shaw were here, when Shaw had it going, just because it was different from everybody else.
Right.
Now I feel like what you're watching tonight, and who knows? I mean, Troy Taylor could be very good, but it's like you kind of got to be a little gimmicky to have any success here. And that doesn't strike me as sustainable in any way, shape, or form.
I don't. And I would say even then, when they had it rolling, nobody cared there. Right. I mean, you've covered games there.
Right.
I mean, it's all Notre Dame fans.
There announced crowd of 30,000 tonight, and that was a huge stretch.
But it was all Notre Dame fans there, even.
Yeah.
Now, I will say,
when they overruled the Jabron Payne fumble to a touchdown, that was one of the loudest moments of the stadium tonight. A Notre Dame touchdown.
The Pac-12 Network Shock showed a lot of pretty much all. I don't think they zoomed in on Stanford fan all night, at least when I had my head up there. Like I did not. They did have Larry Fitzgerald guest broadcast for a little bit too, which I thought was odd because he's all right. Pittsburgh, not a Pac-12 player, but
there was almost a tie in there because he played in the game where Julius Jones set the single season rushing record.
There you go.
Not meant to be. Yeah, it was. I mean, look, this place is very accommodating. My wife and kids went to the game. Tate was wearing a red sweatshirt, and he was walking. He was like, "Oh, like it's just, is this okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Like nobody's gonna say."
No, that's a story. I think it was Bob Bowlesby, his first day as AD there before he became the Big 12 commissioner. The story was like how excited he was to be a Pac-12 AD or whatever it was, and he shows up for the first game, and it's like, "Wait a minute, like, where is everybody?" Yes. Which is the reaction I think a lot of people had. And I will say, going back, like, look, they got killed tonight. They lost to Cal by double digits last week. Oregon State killed them.
Winless at home,
but like, it's a hard job. It's a lengthy rebuild. The final record 3-9 isn't great, but I mean, look, that Colorado comeback is epic. They beat Washington State. Like, that's really hard to do. I know Washington State's not one of the better Pac-12 teams, but like, to do that in year one's impressive. They took Washington, who might be in the playoff, to the absolute limit. They lost to what ended up being an outstanding Arizona team by 1 point. I mean, they were like, you
there
saw
are some
like
things on their resume where you're like, okay, I
like
could see
that's
it.
what you got to look for in year one with a new coach of a rebuild. Like the record's not going to be there, but you need to turn some of those close losses into wins or what have you in year two. Now, completely different schedule and style of play, but I think Troy Taylor will get them as good as they can possibly be in this era. I just don't know how good that is anymore because, again, the NIL era, they don't seem like a school that, despite all their billionaire alums and their big endowment, like it doesn't seem like a school that's going to play that game with the schools they need to play it with.
No,
and look,
in
the
some
other
ways,
no, just because Shannon Turley, their strength coach, when he got let go, that's when things dipped.
yeah,
And you're seeing
Yeah.
that everywhere to some extent, right? And I don't want to glorify, and I don't know exactly what happened to Shannon Turley. I'll be careful here not to glorify the like meathead professional wrestler like stigma that seemed to be a calling card of every strength coach in the country 5 or 10 years ago. However, like Iowa's offensive line was great when Chris Doyle was there. They're not so great since he's been there. They're different. I think there are different programs around the country where you can see a change in strength coach or you get a more player friendly guy, so to speak. And you don't have that fear factor, that toughness, that edge that you kind of like get scared into having, for lack of a better term. So I think that's impactful at a school like Stanford.
I'd say it's going to be impactful at a place like Notre Dame this offseason.
Yeah, it is. It is the transfer thing. I know they can't get too many in. It's probably more restrictive than Notre Dame, Wake Forest, and all the others. During the previous Northwestern regime, the Northwestern folks, at least in Chicago, love to tell us, like, as far as restrictions and like-minded recruits and yada, 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 it was Northwestern, Stanford, and that was it. It's tough. It's tough. It's been done before, but it's going to be really hard to do it, sustainable moving forward. Again, especially in the ACC.
Yeah. Big picture with Notre Dame from the postseason point of view. Florida State won today. And if Florida State goes undefeated, Washington or Oregon makes the playoff, Georgia makes the playoff, and Michigan makes the playoff, Notre Dame will head to the Rely Quest Bowl almost certainly against LSU or Tennessee. Florida State loses next week to Louisville, which seems in play considering how good Louisville has been. They'll be coming off a loss. Florida State down its quarterback. Then maybe Ohio State makes the playoff. But, I mean,
Ohio State is not making the playoff. Last year, you basically had to, like, find two teams to join Michigan, Georgia, because you got two teams that end up in their last game.
Yeah.
This year, you go into championship weekend with what? 7 teams that have at least a chance of making it, excluding.
Yeah, but Ohio State's one of them.
I'm talking about teams that are playing this. I mean,
got it.
2 Pac-12 teams. One of them will probably get in.
Yeah.
Alabama beats Georgia. That's 2 SEC teams. Texas should be in if they win. Florida State should be in if they win. I'm missing someone. Michigan's in if they win. Like, I just
So it's still a very Rely Questy postseason outlook for Notre Dame is the point. It's more
the point is they could still play LSU.
Yeah, they could play LSU
wherever, anytime, anywhere, any bowl.
Yeah, which is any players. I mean that's sort of where you get into the Audric Estimé, Jaden Daniels, who plays, who doesn't. If that happens, it would be January 1. If it doesn't happen, then it'd be Pop-Tarts Bowl on December 28th against a Big 12 team, which would be a big letdown. Because it's just like, I do feel like if Notre Dame plays Tennessee or especially LSU, is it going to make you feel like everything was awesome this season? No, but it's going to make the 8 months that follow the bowl game a lot brighter in South Bend than it would otherwise. Not completely dissimilar to beating South Carolina last year. In the Gator Bowl.
The game itself, if it's against Brian Kelly, would be bigger.
Oh, my God.
The impact, I don't know. I think it would depend on who plays and how they play. And again, I don't think that game would be a reflection on anything that happened for either team this regular season.
No, I mean, just like the Gator Bowl. The Gator Bowl wasn't last year.
No, but like that happened on this night 2 years ago, or what it means for both programs going forward. But it would be the ultimate, like, schoolyard, like I hate my neighbor down the street and just want to beat him at whatever I play
Oh,
kind of
God.
game, even if it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Like it's just like if that, so that's New Year's Day, right? I mean, that's the same day as the semis. It
Yep.
won't rate as high as the semis, but it'll be very fun to compare the ratings of a second tier bowl game
Brian
between
Kelly,
Brian Kelly and Hurd.
Freeman. You got Bob Diaco, Mike Denbrock, Kerry Cooks,
That's right,
Logan
Diaco.
Diggs. I mean, there's just a lot of material there.
Honorary captain Brian Polian. He's neutral now. He can do it.
Yes. We'll have him on the podcast. I think he'd be a great guest.
Actually, yeah, he would be a great guest.
We wouldn't have to say anything.
Brian Kelly could lose to Marcus Freeman and Tommy Reese in the same year, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, that's possible. But yeah, that's the outlook. And there, Marcus Freeman will have a Zoom call on Monday, sort of like to kind of wrap up some big picture stuff. Probably more of a chance to ask, like, who's playing in the bowl? What's up with your coaching staff? How do you sort of see that moving forward? Because it's like, I mean, the carousel, and I mean, you're more on top of this than I am, but like that's people are already getting off the coaching carousel. You know, Michigan State's off the coaching carousel. Texas A&M, maybe they'll be off the coaching carousel by Monday. You know, the Sunday, meaning tomorrow when you're listening to this, there will be some surprises on Sunday, right? I mean, there's just no way the sport is going to.
There always are.
Normally.
I mean, it seems, again, knock on wood, it seems very tame right now. And it seems like the open spots are quickly filling up. But independent of that, like the assistant cycle is its own beast, and there are already prominent openings. You know, USC needs a DC, Penn State needs an OC. We'll see what Notre Dame might need, and you know who's going where. That's almost its own separate cycle, and there's much less of a timeline on that as we saw last year when Tommy Reese left.
Right,
in February, I think.
Yeah, you would think that Notre Dame would be in more control of its destiny with that, at least at the coordinator positions. Like either you're making a change because you want to, or you're making a change because somebody got a head coaching job. In the case of Al Golden, but the NFL jobs, who knows? I mean, that could be into February. So I shouldn't say that Notre Dame's in control of something that is, I think, probably uncontrollable, the way the sport operates.
But even that, like, I was just thinking, why did Alabama open so late? Well, because Bill O'Brien went to the NFL, which created that need. Like, I don't know what the fate of Tom Allen is. I've got a mixed reaction on that from Indiana folks. But again, by the time you listen to this, there's a chance he might not be the Indiana coach. I don't think Dylan McCullough would be the head coach there, but I could see him being brought on as offensive coordinator, associate head coach role, or something to that effect. And you could play that game with a number of different openings, with a number of different.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe Chuck Martin wins the MAC and is the new Indiana coach. And then Miami of Ohio is open for Dylan McCullough. Who knows? I'm just there will be MAC jobs that open. It's hard to, like, Toledo in particular. You know, Jason Candle's done a really good job there. You got to think he's going to land somewhere. You know, is that a job that somebody like Dylan McCullough would be interested in? I have no idea. But there's just, I mean, college football is now I guess it's been a 365-day sport a while now with the transfer portal, but Notre Dame will have, I would assume, will have some significant movement on its staff just because that's the sport. It's impossible not to have it, especially, like, look, I realize Notre Dame was not perfect this season by any stretch of the imagination, but they have some good coaches who did good work that will be in demand. But I think probably I don't know what your question would be for Marcus Freeman on Monday, but like I'm fascinated to sort of see how he entertains or doesn't. Where do you go next on offense? Like, not to paraphrase myself, but like, what's your first next step on offense? Because I don't know if he knows.
You guys, Brian Kelly, that after they lose to Notre Dame in a bowl game.
Yeah,
on defense.
Yes, have a defense. His first next step should be promoting Bob Diaco. But yeah, I want to know how Freeman sees the future of this offense. Like, because I think in some ways the offense did a lot of the things that he would like it to do. It was ball control. It was a battering ram running back at the very end when they figured out how to use him. It was play action, which they figured out at the very end. It just, is that enough in 2023 into 24? I don't know. There's gotta be more at wide receivers. Just gotta be more there than what Notre Dame showed if they're really going to try to get to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, that thought was going through my mind watching the Michigan Ohio State game today. One, because Notre Dame should have beat Ohio State this year, and two, because Notre Dame and Michigan are quote unquote like-minded programs that a lot of times have dealt with some of the same kind of problems as far as what's hampering them from getting to the top. And I mean, look, Michigan has a lot more top end NFL talent on this year's roster than Notre Dame does. I don't think anyone's debating that, but it's not. Even while watching that game today, it wasn't. I don't know if I looked at two teams that are going to. Michigan could win the national title this year. I don't want to say they can't, but I don't think Georgia watched that game thinking, we're shaking in our boots right now. Even Oregon with the way they play, I did not. And maybe the college football world's a little flatter, but I watched the game of the year today in person, and I did not think Notre Dame was really that far away. In fact, look how far away Michigan looked 3 years ago. And I wrote this today, they got accused of quitting and not playing the Ohio State game. And ever since then, they've been Ohio State's daddies. Right. It's the role reversals are completely flipped. But I think both programs in a weird way can be great lessons in stability and not just redoing everything when you have a bad year, not a bad year, or a year that doesn't live up to the standards, right? I mean, again, there are questions about how Michigan got this good. However, they seeing where they were 3 years ago as a program versus where they are now and feeling the big house. I mean, we've been there for some Notre Dame games where it's, it fills up, but it's not a great environment. It's just all right,
no,
here's our 8-4 team. Being there today for a game of that magnitude and seeing, and I would make a pretty compelling argument that Michigan and Notre Dame are the two biggest brands in the sport. Seeing one of those brands at its peak today, where everyone's behind it and they've got the biggest game in the country, which I think was Notre Dame, which I think was Notre Dame in the Ohio State game as far as commanding the attention of the world and being so close to that breakthrough win. It's a nice reminder that good coaches, good programs have bad years. Don't just give up on your approach, so to speak. And I also think the 12-team playoff is going to change everything. As much as Ryan Day is probably miserable right now because he's making $10 million, but is 1-3 against Michigan, no team in the country is going to benefit more from an expanded playoff than Ohio State because they could win it every single year, even by losing to Michigan. In fact, they probably should have won it last year.
I thought you were going to say Penn State.
No, because they'll get in, but they're not a threat to win it. Ohio State, could win it. Notre Dame in a couple of years, if Marcus Freeman's recruiting philosophy, so to speak, takes hold and they show progress on the field year to year, that was the point of his hire, right? Lower floor, higher ceiling. And that is more valuable and advantageous in a 12-team field where you don't have to go undefeated.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways, it is weird to look at what the 12-team field would have looked like and know that Notre Dame wouldn't have made it this year, despite what is clearly a playoff roster in a 12-team field sense of the word, not in a 4-team. And it's also weird to me. How much time did we spend on this podcast and writing about after the Ohio State game? All right, Notre Dame could still make it. They weren't even close. If they had gone 11-1, I don't think they necessarily would have been close to the playoff this year. They would have been eliminated long before tonight.
It would have been 2 years ago, where if everything goes right on conference championship day, maybe you backdoor your way in
a lot,
but
I
almost
think
did.
Yeah, but I think sort of the unifying thought there is the one that you just made is just similarly, Michigan had a down year and kind of doubled down on who they were. I'm not saying that Notre Dame had a down year, but
they finally got a not first round pick, an NFL quarterback in McCarthy. Who lit the world on fire, but it's really good.
Was one. I just I would Jack Swarbrick said in an interview last month or earlier this month, just like he feels more confident in Marcus Freeman today than he did when he hired him, which I guess is somewhat easy to say because when you hired him, you're like, I hope this works. And then you start 0-3 and you're like, wait a minute. I think that there's reason to feel optimistic about where things are going with Freeman. They still need to learn how to play on the road way more consistently than they have. But I think overall, like the way recruiting is going, you understand how important the quarterback position is, both in the portal and recruiting. I think they've handled that better than probably the way that was humming along at the end of the BK era. But it's just he's still learning on the job, and I think that's going to continue for a while. You just sort of have to roll with it and hope that he can get a little bit better next year than he was this year. And he was definitely better this year than he was the season prior. But that's a process that's still got to continue.
Yeah, I get why he feels that way. I mean, there's strategic in game stuff that has fans ripping their hair out from time to time, but I wouldn't be like, oh, look, they took a giant step forward in year 2 under Marcus Freeman. But they sure as hell didn't take a step back.
Yeah, they took a step forward, and the season left you wondering, like, that could have been more of a stride, more of a leap.
Yeah,
and it wasn't.
But that's college football, right? Like, they're living like a blue blood program does. I mean,
yeah. And there's no guarantee like next year that it will continue, right? Like, I mean, we see programs all the time.
Similar, to use like Oklahoma, similar team, right? Made a couple playoffs, never really had a chance to win, other than maybe the first year with Baker, but like really good team. Hires a first-time head coach to replace Lincoln Riley. They were kind of a disaster on the field last year. I wouldn't say Notre Dame was a disaster, but it's like, okay, does Brent Venables really know what he's doing? Well, year 2, they go 10-2, and they probably should have at least won one of those 2 games they lost and been in the Big 12 title. Like, yeah, Brent Venables is their guy moving forward, and he's still got a lot to learn, but it's Oklahoma. They've got a veteran athletic director there, and they know what they're doing as a program, and the support's behind them. And, the season wasn't perfect, but I think it validated their decision to hire a first-time head coach. This season was not perfect for Notre Dame, but they did make some progress under Marcus Freeman. Yeah. And it's not like anything was, again, individual games. Yes. Losing to Marshall, losing to Stanford, terrible. But again, that happens. I'm not saying here like, oh man, Freeman's the guy who's going to lead to the national title within X number of years. It's going to be great. Like, I'm not going that far, but I feel
you want to see more.
I want to see more, but I'm confident he can and will do it, if that makes sense. And again, we've said this before, very rare case where it feels like everyone's looking for a reason to support you and not looking for a reason to say you're not it, which is usually the case in college football.
Yeah, the fact that he's gotten out of 2 seasons, and the vibe around him is still pretty positive. Like, the honeymoon is definitely over, to use that cliche, but I still think people are like, I'd like to see a little bit more of this. Not because it's going to happen or it's like, certain to happen, but I think he's just somebody that the fan base is still, from a personality point of view, is still behind. The coaching stuff has got to cleaned up in some pretty serious instances, but I think if you're Notre Dame, you feel like this is a guy that can, we can get behind, opposed to I've seen just a little bit too much that, maybe this is not happening.
It'll be an important offseason for him. Because again, it's his second, same way this was his second full season as a coach. This is his second full offseason as a coach. And, we don't need to relitigate the personnel stuff that happened last offseason, but like, that's like, if you're looking at one like black mark on his tenure that like everyone is upset about and still upset about with the way the season went, it's that. Like, yes, that's in the back of every Notre Dame fan's mind right now, is like, all right, are you going to do what we feel needs to be done? And are you going to have a plan to make sure our offense is better next year? And I don't say that to say what's the old cliche, right? You listen to the fans, you become one. I don't say it to say like, oh, you got to make a move because the fan base wants you to. But I think that's a very real thing that I almost think like no action is action in some ways. And that's going to be, you're never going to win over or validate keeping things the way they are unless like you keep things the way they are and then you go 12-0 next year or whatever it has you. Like it's just
right.
The off season right now. Like Brian Kelly, different situations because he was losing coordinators that were good, but like think of when Clark Lee left. Marcus Freeman was LSU bound until he wasn't, right? And Notre Dame stole him at the 11th hour, and it was like, holy cow, they just hired the best assistant coach on the block. He chose us over them, and the Notre Dame over the SEC. And like, can you get that kind of offseason win? Because in recruiting, you only get that on signing day. With the way things are now, like you could get a good recruit. You could get a Deuce Knight, but he's a 2025 kid, and if Alabama decides to offer him, I don't know what you can do about that. You know what I mean? Like that's
like you got CJ Carr coming in. I understand what you're saying, but like
they've had Carr already.
Yeah, I mean Marcus Freeman needs to have an offseason win like Brian Kelly had with hiring Marcus Freeman.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's strength coach. I don't know if it's on offense. I don't know if it's another assistant. Maybe Al Golden leaves and they got to hire a banger at DC. I'm not sure. But I do think, I mean, hey, look, the ultimate offseason win would be being Brian Kelly in the bowl game. But he's got to have something a little bit like that. That will make you feel good. But it wouldn't be as healthy as like, I killed it at strength coach, or I made this pivot on offense. I don't know where he goes with that, but I think he's got to have an offseason win that's more substantial than beating the coach that Notre Dame fans love to hate, or just that's or a recruiting win. Like it could be a portal win. Like Sam Hartman was the big offseason win of last year until the offense coordinator search blew up, and then it was kind of negated a little bit, or it was viewed differently. So, I think that's sort of where Freeman is. He's got to find an offseason win. And like those offseason wins don't always turn into actual wins. Ask Dabo Swinney about that and hiring Garrett Riley. Right. Like, just think if Notre Dame had hired Garrett Riley as the offense coordinator last winter, what would we have said about that? Like that would have been hiring Marcus Freeman as your defense coordinator. If you're Brian Kelly, that would have been huge. It's stuff doesn't always work out, but Marcus Freeman's got to, I think, he can get out of the weeds after tonight, blowing out Stanford 56-23, and sort of think a little bit bigger picture. I realize the bowl is still part of the season, but it is less part of the season every year.
Yes,
and with the way the carousel's going already. You gotta get out ahead of some of this stuff, and so be very curious to sort of see where that goes in the coming days, but maybe more likely the coming weeks.
Do you? And I don't know the answer to this question, nor do I think you know it, but I'm curious because you knew this was coming. They've not done this like Monday post. Now, part of it's the recruiting stuff. They have more free time now, but they've not done a Monday like season wrap up thing 2 days after the season. At least as long as I've been around. Do you think they did that with the intention of delivering news? Because like you're going to do a bowl one next week, and that's when you'll have the bowl like opt out news. You're not going to know that.
I don't. I think it had much more to do with like hey, we want to get out of Stanford as quickly as possible, and so instead of turning this press conference into something bigger picture, we'll give you all the big picture stuff on Monday. So, and then Freeman can engage in it a little bit more, opposed to like coming down from the high of actually coaching a game. So I don't think there's any intention behind it, but it may still serve that purpose on Monday. Right. I don't know if it will, but it could. So it'll certainly it creates a forum to ask that very question.
Right. Now I was just curious because it was out of standard operating procedure over recent years.
All right. Well, I don't know. You got anything else from tonight? Or?
No, and we'll talk to him in 2 days, which, usually we sign off on these and it's like, all right, we'll know a bowl in a week. What's that?
We'll be back when we're back.
We'll be back when we're back. Yeah. Maybe, yeah. I don't, we'll do a midweek show this week, right?
Yes.
Hopefully
100%. Yeah, I'll be staying out here for a couple extra days. That was my plan 2 years ago. It was a absolute disaster. But again, knock on press row here. The next 72 hours don't need to be what they were 2 years ago when we were doing like 6 podcasts in a week, sometimes 2 in one day. As I was holed up in my hotel room in Half Moon Bay. So hopefully it's a little bit quieter than that. I cannot imagine it could be more tumultuous. But
Don't say that.
Yeah, I shouldn't say that. Let me take that back. So we'll wrap it up there before I talk myself into some huge jinx. After Notre Dame's 56-23 blowout of Stanford, finishes the regular season 9-3, and that's a wrap from Notre Dame's regular season. I'm Pete Sampson atop Stanford Stadium. He's Matt Fortuna in a hotel room in Farmington Hills, Michigan. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and that's it for the Independent. Post
year one,
Notre Dame Stanford.
First next step for the Independent in our first offseason.
Yeah. Independent not opting out of a bowl game. So we'll be back many times in the coming days and weeks. But thanks for being with us it's been a fun season. The first run of this show. Great to hear from so many people around Notre Dame Stadium and every road venue I go to. People love the Independent. So appreciate you guys.
Thank you guys.
That's a wrap.
It's been a blast.